Ready? Good evening. Our short talk presentation tonight is by our former W.A.S. president, Mr. Bob Berta. The title of his talk is The Space Between Us. Mr. Bob Berta.
Okay. Unfortunately, Gary Ross is not here tonight, so I can't really meet him, but actually this talk is going to be based on a science fiction movie. And also, this is somewhat of an interactive talk, so I would suggest during the talk, if you want to put a couple points in, feel free. And this talk was originally based on a previous, I guess, a group presentation we did talking about whether we should continue with manned space exploration or unmanned space exploration. The movie I saw, which, how many have ever heard this movie called The Space Between Us? Well, some of you may have seen it. I feel sorry for you if you did. You know, that's a type of movie that's probably not the greatest thing from a science fiction standpoint, but it did something which I thought was really unique in that it proposed some problems we're going to have trying to go somewhere else in space. Just a real short synopsis of the talk is decide they're going to have NASA is going to go to Mars for the first time and colonize it. When they went to Mars, bearing in mind that when you go to Mars, you just don't hop onto a ship and take off whenever you want. You have to time it with special, you know, when the optimum point is, when Mars is closest to us, etc. So once you're on your way, you can't just turn around and come back. Well, that presented a problem because of the people on the ship going to Mars to colonize it. One of them was a woman who they found out after took off she was pregnant. And that was number one problem. Number two problem was it was very embarrassing of NASA to say we messed up. And there's a lady who's going to be giving birth when she gets to Mars, or maybe before she gets to Mars. So the ship is on its way. The lady does give birth. Unfortunately, she passes away during childbirth. And the reason for that, explained in the movie, which I think is probably likely, is that the human body wasn't made to go to that type of trauma through childbirth in low gravity situations. And that may have been part of the problem. The other problem was this child, who was a boy, was born, and they were trying to withhold that information from the public because they didn't want to be embarrassed. So what they did was kept it from the public. And this boy then grows up, becomes 16 years old on Mars. And part of the unscientific part of this is that this boy was carrying on a remote conversation back on Earth with a girl he thought was interesting, kind of had an internet connection with her. Well, unfortunately, you can't just send a note to somebody on the internet, them receive it, and immediately answer you back, but that part was left out in the movie. But anyway, this couple, the 16-year-old boy and a girl, got to be friendly, and they started having feelings for each other. So this boy decided he had to come back to Earth to meet this girl. Well, that caused a problem because when he finally got back to Earth, his body had been developing all through in utero to when it was born and all the whole time on Mars in low gravity. And so he had a heart which wasn't the strength of a normal heart. His muscle structure was very light, so his legs, you know, his muscle structure was very, very weak, which was fine on Mars because you're only about 40% of the gravity. But when you turn around and come back to Earth, guess what? You're now dealing with a body that can't handle the stress of more gravity. So what does this have to do with science exploration? One thing I have a real problem with, and I think science is finding us out through NASA, through our medical science, is that there are some real issues going somewhere else. That was just a couple of possible scenarios where you could have a problem taking humans to another place in space. The other problem that's very realistic is through our astronauts who are right now on the International Space Station. You know about the twin brothers, and one was kept on the space station for over a year, brought back. He's being compared to his brother here on Earth. Also, all the astronauts who have gone to extended times in outer space found out they have, a large percent of them have a eye injury, a problem with their eye vision that has decreased and it's not coming back. There are other things that can happen in space. When you're going on a long trip, like from here to Mars, you're exposed to radiation. And if you ever have a major solar eruption, coronal mass ejection, and you're traveling there, you probably aren't going to survive in your spaceship. You can't just roll up the window and say it's not going to happen. Well, guess what? It is. So getting there is going to be a major problem. Once you get to Mars, okay, you've been traveling on low gravity for all this time. What does that mean? Your body has reduced strength, your ability to do things is reduced. You get onto Mars, and guess what? Just like the astronauts, when they come back to Earth, it takes them a long time to get their, you might say, their sea legs back. Well, if you go to Mars, you're going to have the same issue. What are you going to do? You can't just hop out of the spaceship and start working there. That's an issue. Another problem there is, if you're exposed to radiation there, which you will be, because it does have almost a nebulous non-atmosphere on Mars, what's going to happen?
No magnetic field.
Yeah, no magnetic field. So what's going to happen to you? You're going to have to get off the surface, which means you're not going to be able to sit on a tent pod on the surface. You're going to have to get down in below ground in caves to survive any time at all. So these are just some of the issues that are going to be a major problem to going and not just colonizing, just visiting another place, but even colonizing. So this is not something that unfortunately is shown on TV and on movies now. You hop into a spaceship, go to another planet, hop out, you're free to do everything you want to do and everything else, enjoy it, take your pictures, do your scientific studies, hop back in the ship, come back to Earth. It's not going to happen. So I think that perhaps TV and movies have given a really false sense to the public about what we can and can't do as a human in outer space. This talk that we did some time ago, we had the pro-man exploration, the con negative exploration. I'm a big fan of doing that again because enough information has come out now. We need to do that again. That was about 8 years ago, I think. Yeah, Jim and I think Ken was heating up the two sides of it, and that was a great talk. And I think there's enough information now, so I think we did a study there. So if you have some input, I don't know, that's probably about my time, but I didn't want to go over. So if you have some questions, a couple of short ones.
Yeah, we have time for questions.
Okay, about maybe
Looks
5
like
minutes
Jim
worth.
has a hand up, John.
Okay, Jim.
Just last week, there was on PBS, there was a, I think it was a 2-hour program about the twin brothers,
Yeah, the Kellys.
the 365 days in space. But it discussed a lot of these issues, including the radiation issue, which I was kind of interested to learn that they're doing some genetic research that that have promises to be able to, so to speak, inoculate you against radiation by changing a few chromosomes. So the point is that this 365 days in space was directly, with the twin brothers in particular, was directed at solving some of these problems. And engineers and scientists are finding new ways, and that 10 years from now, the way science is moving, there will be many solutions to many of those problems. But it's an interesting thing to speculate on, and keep your eyes open.
One thing I didn't mention, there's also an issue of when you take a bunch of really super smart AA personality people, put them into a phone booth on a trip to Mars, whatever. I don't know if you have any kids in a car, it doesn't take very long before the kids are at each other's throats, right? Well, you can imagine if you have a bunch of NASA brainiacs up there on a long trip, the question is when they get to Mars, will anyone be left?
Well, look what happened in the Martian.
Right.
They survived pretty good.
Jonathan.
Yeah, Ken?
I've always been an advocate of met people not in space, but through the years, there is one thing that humankind is good at: they're resilient. And as Jim said, just to support him, I hate to do that, but but the fact of the resiliency of our science and what we are makes it very possible.
Mm-hmm.
Not now, not too very long, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. I did read a scientific, a science fiction book one time about they said that probably man won't visit other places till they can become bionic man. And that probably is a lot to that.
Jonathan had a question.
Not so much a question as an observation that if you missed the great debate, man versus unmanned spaceflight, it is up on our YouTube, so it's not quite the same as being there, but it's still pretty entertaining.
Yeah, you might even on our, up in the upcoming issue, if you have a date or something, you can reference the date that happened. That was a really cool talk.
We ought to repeat that on its
Yeah.
10th anniversary or
Yeah, that'd be
or
great.
something like that.
Yeah.
I'm good with it.
Okay, we have another talk, so pick out more than once, guys. Okay, that it?
Other questions?
Any other
Comments?
I just like
We got one from Bob
comment.
here.
There's been any number of science fiction books I've read recently where they've talked about how this environment that we're in this is our environment, and out there is not very nice to us. And if we're going to go out there, we're probably going to have to be genetically engineered to survive in those environments. And will we be human anymore?
Yep. Again, if Gary Ross is here, he'd be
He'd
going
be
into
on the
a
floor
field
twitching.
position here, because Gary can't stand science fiction, but
I'll let
I
him know
think
he
there's
missed.
some real things to.
You know what the difference between science fiction and science fact is?
Yes.
Timing.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's true. That's true.
Well,
Gary loves science fiction, just not at the astronomy club.
Yeah.
Well, that was a stimulating talk, Bob, and as somebody who suffered through the trailer to that movie twice, I appreciate you giving me the recap. Yeah,
Okay, well, thank you.
thank you.